Ali came home the way most young men do after university, quietly, with a degree in one hand and no clear idea what to do with it in the other. He had spent 4 years in the city studying accounting and political science. He had graduated in June, smiled for the photographs his mother would frame, and then returned to his small town in Pakistan to wait, to apply, to figure it out. He had not expected to fall in love with farming. It crept up on him. He would wake early and sit on the front step with his tea, watching the light rise over the fields. He watched tractors move like slow, purposeful animals. He started reading about soil composition and crop cycles. He watched videos late into the night, learning about soil pH, hardpan layers, and the difference between sandy loam and clay. He began to think, I could do this. It was the most grounded thought he had had in years. He started asking around. But in a town where everyone knew the history of every acre, a 22-year-old with a city degree was a hard sell. He asked Hamid, who farmed 60 acres of wheat. Hamid looked at him with the patience of a man who had seen many young ideas fail. You've never farmed a day in your life, son. Come back when you've got a season under your belt. He asked the Yusuf brothers. They laughed. You'll flood it or dry it out. Either way, our land suffers. Even old Mrs. Karimi told him to go find a job in the city. Farming is not for people who read about it on their phones, she said. Ali felt close to hopeless. He almost sent out the last of his city job applications. Then he remembered the land. His aunt's land. 15 acres on the eastern edge of town that most people had quietly agreed to forget. The soil there had once grown wheat, but decades ago the salt had crept up and a hardpan layer had set like concrete beneath the surface. The ground had become, by general agreement, useless. Ali drove out to see it on a Thursday afternoon in late 2022. The ground was pale and compacted, gray with salt crust. Nothing was growing. He pressed his boot into the surface. It was hard as ceramic. Underneath lay a hardpan layer, dense and impermeable, suffocating any root system that tried to push through. Most people looked at this land and saw a problem. Ali looked at it and saw a sequence of steps. He went to his aunt. She had watched that land sit dead for a decade. I want to farm it, Ali told her. 15 acres of wheat. I've researched land reclamation. The soil isn't dead, it's just compacted and saline. Deep ploughing to break the hardpan, leaching the salt with irrigation, soil conditioners. It can be done. You've never farmed, she reminded him. I know, but I know the science. I can't pay you for the first year, but when I harvest, I'll pay you well. If nothing grows, you've lost nothing. She looked at him for a long time. Then she said, 1 year, Ali, one chance. Ali spent 2 weeks planning. He called agricultural offices and spoke to soil scientists, asking precise questions about cation exchange capacity and gypsum application rates. The plan was methodical. First, deep ploughing. He hired a heavy subsoiler to cut 60 centimeters deep, shattering the hardpan to allow water to move. Second, leaching. He would flood the field in controlled passes to carry the accumulated salt below the root zone. Third, soil conditioning. He calculated gypsum application rates to displace sodium and restore the soil structure. Then, and only then, wheat. He began in October 2022. The subsoiling took 4 days. The machine shook through the gray ground, heaving up clods that crumbled, the first sign that the hardpan was fracturing. He cleared the silted irrigation channels by hand, digging out decades of debris until his back ached. The first time he ran water onto the field, it didn't pool, it sank. He leached the field in 3 passes. He sent samples to a lab and saw the numbers shift. The sodium levels were dropping. He applied the gypsum and a balanced fertilizer. In November 2022, he planted. Then came the waiting. Waiting, he learned, was the hardest part of farming. He walked the field every morning at first light, looking for germination. For 8 days there was nothing. The anxiety came at night. He would lie awake questioning every decision. Did I plow deep enough? Were the fertilizer rates wrong? Was everyone else right? On the ninth day he found it, a thin line of green, fragile as a held breath, running along the first drill. By the end of the third week, the field was covered. Not perfectly, but it was living. A crop where there had been nothing for 10 years. When the field turned green, Ali could finally breathe. Winter passed in work. He monitored moisture, adjusted irrigation, and watched the wheat grow with slow, reliable patience. He walked the rows, feeling the plants as they tillered and spread. By February, the field looked like a wheat field. Harvest arrived in late April 2023. The wheat stood heavy and gold, moving in the wind like waves. Ali stood at the edge and felt something quieter than pride, the feeling of having asked a hard question of the earth and received a generous answer. The machine began its pass across the field everyone said was dead. People came to watch. Hamid was there. The Yusuf brothers were there. Mrs. Karimi stood with her arms folded and a complicated, warm expression on her face. His mother stood by the fence in her good clothes. His aunt stood closest. She watched in silence as the golden rows were gathered. The yield was strong. For reclaimed ground, it was remarkable. The grain buyer said as much, and he was not a man of compliments. Hamid shook Ali's hand. "I was wrong," he said. Mrs. Karimi held his face in her hands. "Clever boy, I always said it." He didn't remind her of what she had actually said. He paid his aunt that evening, the full year's rent plus the profit share. They sat at her kitchen table, just as they had a year before. "What will you do now?" she asked. The city was still there, with its offices and spreadsheets, but Ali looked at his hands. "I'd like to do it again. Same land, and maybe the 10 acres to the north. I can pay the rent up front this time." She smiled. "Then we have a deal." Driving home through the dark, Ali thought about the field as he had first seen it, pale, cracked, and abandoned. He thought about the 9th morning and the thin green line that changed everything. He realized the earth had not laughed at him. It had simply waited to see what he would bring to it. And when he brought patience, knowledge, and work, it had given back more than he had a right to expect. Ali went inside, sat in the quiet kitchen, and began planning for next season.